The scriptures warn against idols, but surely they aren't something that you deal with as a pastor or a leader in your church. Well, you might be surprised at the ways that idols can crop up in your life and in ministry. Do you think idols impact your life? Let us know in the comments. Today on IBL's Leadership for Today program, Vice President of Ministry Dr. Dave Dietz and Director of Coaching and Training with IBL Dr. Joel Chetro discuss some situations in which idols can sneak up on us. Both have spent time in a senior leadership position at a church and bring their experience in coaching and pastoring to this discussion. Be warned, this discussion might hit close to home, and with that can often come a tendency to see the fault in others. Keep watching only if you're ready for Christ to use this discussion to shed some light in dark places in your life. You can take advantage of the worksheet linked in the description of this video, which is geared towards helping you uncover idols in your life.
Tim's introduced the topic for us today regarding when ministry becomes an idol, identifying when ministry is an idol. And so I want to kind of set up this situation for us to talk about and then kind of lead into a question. And for sake of illustration, we are simply going to use the situation of a man who is pastoring a church, who, for whatever reason, for whatever situation, ministry has become an infatuation to him and something that has demanded his time. And his spouse, the wife in this case, has the situation where she claims that this man will make sure that he is there to minister to everyone else in the church and in their time of need and whatever they have going on, but it is difficult to get him to tend to his family's needs. And so this is kind of the situation. And the question that we want to talk about today is, how do I assess and handle this situation as a leader's spouse? How do I know when ministry is becoming an idol or is an idol in our life? So maybe Joel, could you just kind of walk us through what an idol is?
Sure. So, in the case of this scenario, you've got a pastor and his wife, and they're working through this. I mean, I think number one, we have to recognize that all of us have a tendency, even those of us that love God and those of us who are very clear on our personal theism, our personal belief and loyalty to God, it's easy to slip into a pattern of practical atheism where we act like we don't believe in God because we're careless, and growing out of our hearts are these idols of the heart that can sometimes overtake us. And specifically with the scenario that you have painted, you have an individual, you have this pastor, and let's say for sake of discussion that this isn't merely imagined. It's not the result of unfair expectations that the wife has or that others have, but really, in fact, he has truly made his reputation in ministry or his success in ministry, or to one degree or another, his ministry has become an idol. Well, Matthew chapter 6, Jesus, if you remember, Jesus talks about not storing up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust and thieves can steal and destroy. But it's interesting in that passage, he goes on in the latter part of that passage. He says, look, as you're serving me, you're either going to serve me entirely with the true focus of serving me, or if you allow, your own PR, your own ministry priorities, if you allow those things to creep in, then yeah, you slipped into idolatry.
Yeah, anything that can consume our time, anything that can consume our passions, it's something that we have to have. I have to have this, and we would concede. I think both you and I in this situation would concede. We're not talking about a season of time in ministry. We're going through a tragedy or a trial, or maybe like we just came out of a 2-month period, 2.5-month period where everything was so different for churches and pastors had to adjust. And we're talking about a lifelong process. We're talking about a habit of character.
Yeah.
When we're talking about this particular situation with this pastor, where he or his life is known as a man who spends more time, engages more time with ministry than he does his own family. The wife can't get him to take care of what she needs him to take care of for the family. When we talk about what idols do in our hearts, we would talk about the fact that they govern us, they control us. It may start off as something subtle. It may start off as something that we're not even aware of, but it's something that begins to control us. It begins to govern us. It kind of grows maybe out of the thoughts and the motives of our hearts without even us being aware. It's possible that there may be guys, or if we're talking about a woman in some form of leadership, a woman who doesn't even realize that ministry has become an idol. They never set out to say, I'm rejecting my family and I'm going to idolize ministry. But this can grow out of maybe the secret parts of the heart.
Yeah. No, it can be subtle, right? I think that even when we have a clear love for the Lord and we have a clear commitment to ministry, so all of us in ministry recognize that we have imperatives with our spouse and our family, but then we also have imperatives with God's family. Let's just admit it, in ministry, it is really easy, if we're not careful, to pit one family against another family. And God's word is clear. We must not do that. We cannot do that. And we often will do that when success in ministry becomes an idol.
Yeah, and we are struggling to feel accepted. We're struggling to feel significant. We're struggling to, maybe it's a simple thing of, I just long to help people. I've got a desire. I mean, the majority of guys in ministry, or women in ministry, are there because they want to help people. They desire to be able to meet the needs of people spiritually, and sometimes those things can creep to a point where we don't even realize. Yeah. Where the treasures of our hearts, those hidden things of our heart, are now being fulfilled. And if we're not careful, they can develop into these full-blown idols, full-blown situations. At IBL, we'll talk about 7 different ways that idols impact our life. And Tim is actually going to post some of these at the end of the video, but maybe just highlighting a couple of these, and then we'd love to have you interact with that graphic that Tim is going to put up at the end. Maybe one way, Joel, that you could think of that idols impact our lives.
Well, so one is anger. Idols can make me angry. It's easy to get frustrated. In James chapter 4, James starts that passage off talking about wars between our members. And then it's interesting, in verse 2, he essentially says, look, in this scenario, you didn't get your way. And so now, now you're angry, you're ticked off, and now we're going to war with each other. And so, so clearly one of the ways these idols of my heart demonstrate that they actually have more of a control on me than what I even know is when I'm getting angry. I'm thoughtful of the passage that says, the wrath of man works not the righteousness of Christ. And sometimes we in ministry, we'll get angry, we get ticked off, and we want to cover that with the veneer, oh, well, that's righteous indignation. And a lion's portion of the time, no, you're just ticked off in your flesh. And oftentimes that's connected to the fact because, you've got this idol of the heart that's fueling some very unhealthy things.
Yeah, somebody didn't give you affirmation you wanted, or recognition you wanted, or they called somebody else instead of calling you for whatever situation they had going on. Certainly one of the other things to think about in the ways idols impact our life is consuming our ministries, consuming my ministry. with pleasure or power or popularity. There are so many components that can go into ministry life, and even though most of us start off with good intentions, with the right attitudes, with the right mindset of ministry, you get into ministry and you realize, there is joy and pleasure from being needed and having affirmation. And so somebody criticized me, and boy, that makes me angry, like you talked about. But somebody tells me I did a great job, and that's what I long. It almost becomes like a drug in some ways if we're not careful. Over time, the idol of ministry, that our lives, our ministries are consumed with this pleasure, with the power, with the popularity that maybe some of us enjoy through our church. Especially if you have a larger church, a larger following, a larger group, that can certainly dominate our lives. And so when we talk about idols, and we talk about how idols can affect us in ministry, there's really 4 types of idols at IBL that we'll talk about, but 2 of them are the idols of people and the idols of position that I think hold relevance to this conversation. The idol of people is a governing desire to gain acceptance. I want to be accepted. I want people to love me, to appreciate me, to honor me. And it's almost like we're doing this number at the same time. The humble side of us is supposed to say, I don't want your applause. I don't want your acceptance. I'm just here to humbly serve God. And yet the flesh side of us is saying, you know what? Yeah, we really actually do. And so people is definitely one of them. Position is another one. You can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I think it's easy, right? With this idol of the heart, especially like you say, when it makes us feel good, we're able to do some things, and so people say thank you. We feel like, wow, I'm really fulfilling a specific niche in the Lord's work. That can be subtly turned from a positive thing to something that's detrimental. I mean, honestly, it probably is a blessing in disguise that God has allowed us to go through a season when a lot of us that are used to doing a certain amount of work in ministry, we're still doing work in ministry, but maybe it's not quite as public. And maybe what we're doing is a little bit different. And so I think that's good, because it's easy to substitute a focus of being right with the focus of doing. Now, I'm not saying that it's wrong to have a focus on doing, but far more important than doing is being. And I think it's not hurtful for us to go through a season where maybe what we do is not quite as public, and we have to be quiet before the Lord. And honestly, I think that's going to be a fantastic impact on slaying some of those hidden idols of the heart that actually are not hidden to God.
Yeah. Again, I mean, I think, at IBL, we would say these are things that need to be thought about. They need to be evaluated. They need to be analyzed. And we're going to give you some of those resources to look through and to think about. And we recognize that the vast majority of guys are not making an intentional decision to say, I'm going to idolize ministry, I'm going to neglect my family. But we also recognize that over time, these things can creep in and slowly erode the very fiber of the character of our being, and certainly something that is detrimental. Joel, maybe the last 15 seconds to let you kind of say a final thought here.
Yeah, I would just say it's going to be important for all of us to have an open palm. All of us, there's not any of us that do not struggle at some degree or another an idol of the heart. And so maybe it would be good for all of us to just spend some real quiet time with the Lord, just asking God to reveal what maybe some of those propensities are for us and concerning our own idol. I'm quite confident that if we'll do that, the Lord will answer that prayer. He'll reveal it, and we'll have an opportunity to grow.
I hope you found this discussion helpful. If anything in this conversation hit home and you want to talk to someone, please visit iblministry.org and contact us. IBL is regularly putting out resources like this one. Please like us on Facebook to be notified when new resources post. I'm your host, Tim Hall, and I hope to see you next time on Leadership for Today.